Welcome to the Embodiment Podcast. This show is for you if you see the body as more than a brain taxi. It's for people interested in coming home to the body as a holistic aspect of who we are and how we live. Episodes contain practical tips, exercises you can take away, and interviews with embodiment specialists from around the world. I'm your host, Mark Walsh. So on the show today, David Weinstock. So David I've known for some years. He's an experienced aikido teacher, somatic coach, the originator of something called somatic consensus. He is also a goldsmith, nonviolent communication international trainer. He wrote a cool book, which is on my desk, called Becoming What You Need. We'll get into that. David, welcome.
Nice to see you, Mark. It's been a while.
It has. It was 10 years ago at the Strozzi Ranch we met. And you were playing guitar and I was flirting with some girl. And I distinctly remember it. And since then, you've been doing all kinds of awesome things. So welcome. I usually start with the same question for everyone. How did you get interested in working with the body?
Oh, let's see. That's a good question. Well, I think let's see. When did I first get involved with that? Goes back quite a way. I think the biggest, the thing that really took me to it was, a self-journey. About almost 30 years ago, my wife and I and our young son, we co-founded an intentional community, which is 9 families. We got together, we bought land, and the notion was that we were going to be developing community, stewarding the land, raising our children a little more collaboratively, and sharing resources where we could, which is, all a great idea, and those principles still stand. And, we were all in our own ways, activists and leaders and doing different things. And I, for one, thought I had my act together pretty well. But then we started to live together. And we each had our own homes and everything, but community and really living in, a step towards, a deeper kind of community, towards our ancestral roots, if you will, like, our tribe, but we were far from that. But learning how to live in community was very triggering, very difficult, and a whole nother animal than, organizing or working in organizations or going to, religious institutions or different things, which are all community, but this was a step more intense, and I found myself pretty triggered. So it brought me inward.
So there's a bit of a pressure cooker, isn't there? There's one thing going to a course for a weekend, and we even see it on courses. We have people live together for a few days, and there's a way in which something happens, which is both transformative but also triggering. It exposes kind of people's patterns in a way, living together. So even if you're in separate houses, but sort of over time, there's kind of like less escape, and it has a way of kind of bringing out people's patterns. So that's what I'm hearing happened. And you then went, hang on a minute, maybe I'm not quite as together as I thought. Is that the story?
Oh yeah, it was like living in a house of mirrors, in a pressure cooker of relationships. And so I had to do a lot of double time, and actually a lot of, and so that led me over to really doing a certain kind of somatic work, and meeting Richard Strozzi and Wendy Palmer and Stuart Heller and Paul Linden, one of our mutual friends and elders.
Yeah, you just named 4 of the kind of most influential people in the field, all been big influences on me from the kind of embodiment world that's coming out of aikido, particularly those 4 of the martial arts, right? So there's people who listen to the show that aren't from that world and might not know those names, but a lot of the people I've had on the show that were friends of mine or I've known for years, like you, have kind of come out of those kind of lineages.
Yeah, and I definitely have to include my aikido sensei, Koichi Barish, Reverend Koichi Barish, up in Granite Falls, Washington, and he's a phenomenal aikidoist. And so actually what really, again, keep going backwards into what led me into this, besides, of course, my earliest life. But before the community even, I was doing some political activism and really wanted organizing and working with people and trying to find my voice out in the world. And I landed one day in this Aikido dojo, and I thought, wow, this is the perfect training for working with people out in the world in a way that I want to do it. And so I recognize that aikido practice would help train me to be who I want to be in the world.
Yeah. So you're interested in becoming a better person, for one of a more elegant phrase, interested in better relationships. And then you find this aikido, and it's like, wow, this is actually, and again, I'm really paraphrasing it, so tell me if I'm off, like a physical expression of this. This is actually a training. This is something like a practice, a way. It's not just a book or a theory.
That's it. So, I found that, the Aikido dojo was a perfect metaphor for how I wanted to be in the world, and vice versa. So yeah, it just gave me time to reflect and physically train in the embodiment of Aikido, which is, the Budo, the warrior's way, which is evolved through Aikido to recognize that the most powerful way is love, and encoded into Aikido training is the power of love and, mind, body, spirit. And it's like, that was incredible entry into the somatic realm.
Yeah, and I, remember when we met, I'd done maybe 10 years of Aikido, but more as a martial art, and it had some sense, through people like Don Levine, that it could be more than that, and it could be used socially and constructively, and, it was a way of developing myself, but it was still pretty abstract. It was just, if I threw people around, somehow I'd become a better person. And then I kind of went out to California, and all of a sudden I met all these people, Strozzi being one, but also yourself and, loads of other people I was meeting out there, students of Do of various kinds. And it was like, wow, there's a whole lot of people who are really deep in this work of seeing a martial art as a self-development art, and really taking, not just giving lip service to that, but that being very central to their practice.
Yeah, I'm really grateful to just landed there.
I remember, so I was doing Aikido with someone, I was kind of young buck, and I was kind of struggling with them. And the guy goes, dude, it's about not fighting. And I kind of just felt so Californian at the time, but I was also like, wow, okay. So like, this guy's really not interested in throwing me around, even though he could. It was like a 4th degree black belt I was training with, Grayson, I think it was, if you know him. And it was like impressive that even though he could throw me around and was a strong guy, it was like clear that it was the philosophical endeavor, the embodied philosophical endeavor, the endeavor of who do you want to be as a person?
Without getting into it too much, because it's a little heady sometimes to talk about, but it really trains you in the art of living in the flow of our lives as a paradox.
Yeah.
Where there's not this right or wrong answer, but everybody holds a piece of the puzzle, and learning to dance between it, learning to have a skillful vulnerability so that we can connect and also be safe.
And so you're studying kind of physical arts, and one thing I quickly realized is that just doing the traditional art wasn't really enough for most people, A, to get it off the mat, who were doing that practice, but B, most people would never step onto a mat in the first place. So there was kind of 2 basic problems there. 1, most people aren't going to go into a dojo, and 2, most people who do were doing it with some sort of naive sense that will somehow transfer in their life. If I was being really honest, I just didn't see that. And that's where I was so impressed when I started to see people who were doing practices that could be done, by ordinary people, by everyday people, by people in suits, by people who weren't going to be interested in the sort of martial arts aspect. That was the new thing for me when I went out there.
Yeah, me too. I mean, the idea of how we're always practicing something, that principle of that somatic principle that no matter what we're doing, we're practicing something. I'm practicing how I'm listening to you or judging you, or or how I'm receiving you or not receiving you, or I'm practicing how I'm breathing right now.
We're making something more readily available, right? Because I know this phrase, we're always practicing, can be confusing to people because they might think of that as a conscious activity. But it's the idea here is that whatever you're doing, you're getting better at, and is becoming more readily available.
Right. So it's really helps to become more and more conscious of what you're practicing that serves you, and what you're practicing that doesn't serve you. And then, that's our work right here. I know that's what you're all about as well, is noticing those things, and then organizing yourself through what you care about, what you love, what brings you joy, and organizing yourself to motivating your practices through those through what brings joy and meaning in your life. Is that right?
Yeah, I'm in full alignment there. And I was just reading your book before we came on, just nodding, kind of skimming through it, but nodding and, recognizing some stuff from mutual teachers and some real innovations you made. So I'd like to come to some of those.
Sure.
What are some of the kind of practices? Because we've had lots of people on from Aikido, and it might be a bit boring for the non-Aikido people, but what are some of the core practices you've taken out of Aikido, which kind of anyone can do? They're the things that seem most useful.
Well, let's see. There's several. The three that come to mind, and I'll share a little bit of each. One is about creating a listening field, or a key field in Aikido, or an empathic listening field in other disciplines. One, and building qualities of being. One is about 5 elements, and shifting and finding qualities within those elements and about those elements and exploring them in yourself. And the other one comes out of a main practice of Aikido called Irimi Tenkan, which means essentially enter and turn.
Yeah.
And so those are the three. I could unfold every one in a few minutes, but also take a day or two and explore any one of them.
And I'm surprised you didn't have some kind of centering or grounding or self-regulation kind of practice in there was one of those, or is that part of the 5 elements practice?
Oh, actually every practice is a centering practice in that book.
Got it.
Here's one. I'd be happy to share one with you, and
let's do it.
Call this one surf. And I like the analogy of surfing, of course, because when you engage a wave, you have to center yourself, but it's not about controlling the wave. It's about meeting the wave and staying centered as you ride it. And when you can engage the wave, you can go faster and more enjoyably than you ever can alone without the wave. So this is called SURF, SURF. It's an acronym, and it means shape, unify, resource, and field. A little bit of a story is one of the things that I do is I teach nonviolent communication.
Yeah, definitely wanted to come to that next, actually. Yeah.
Sure. Well, this was the aha moment.
Mm-hmm.
For I was studying nonviolent communication. Again, we were living in our intentional community here. We were looking for better ways to communicate, and got introduced to nonviolent communication, which, like Aikido, I saw the value in it immediately, but it would seem like a kind of a mystery at the same time. And but at that point, I was gonna grab onto anything that might help, because again, I think living in intentional community, we were trying to reclaim something that's pretty lost. The depthful community is something that just as humans, I think, we're pretty fragmented. So, at any rate, I was at one of these workshops, and someone said to me, the teacher said, work in triads, and I was working with 2 people, and my instruction was to sit there and listen with empathy as these 2 did a role play conflict. And I'm sitting there and I'm listening, and I'm holding them in my attention of listening with care. And I went, oh my God, this is Aikido, because that is what we learn to do in Aikido. We learn to hold someone in our listening, whole self listening, mind, body, spirit listening. And when we do that, we can sense their intention. And when we can sense their intention, we can actually know what they're going to do before they do it. You can feel someone's energy body, someone who is going to attack you. You can feel that intention before they actually move. I mean, in the training, that's what that's how we all listen to each other. That's empathy. And I went, my God, that's what empathy is. And so this surf practice is a practice I would teach my beginner and advanced Aikido students. But now it's one of the core teachings I bring to the NBC world, because it's a less abstract understanding of a practice for empathy.
Yeah, just to briefly say what NVC is, then, because it's the first time for most listeners, I imagine. So nonviolent communication, Marshall Rosenberg founded it, a mediator, all about feelings and needs, requests, observations. What is it? Give us the brief.
Oh, no. Okay. We live in a culture, our Western culture, that has it's a lot about domination, control, and hierarchies. It has been for thousands of years. And our language reflects that. It's all throughout our language, the things that words and ways that we speak, and that we hold each other power over one another and control. So nonviolent communication, first of all, it really nails those habits that also feed that kind of way of being.
There's a retraining of habits, isn't it? Like even simple things like making requests or, looking at judgments and blame, and instead going for, okay, what's my actual observation here? Can I be clean and actually what I'm observing and not mix in other things, mix judgments in with that? Do I have an emotional literacy? That was one of the things I was learning when I met you. Strozzi would be like, okay, mood check, how you all feeling? And I'd be like, I don't know, like, it's like hungry, it's like I wasn't very good at that. That was a literacy. And then like tuning into our needs seems to be at the very heart of NVC as a system. But on the surface, it looks like a linguistic system, right? And often does involve people sitting around and talking a lot. But it's a lot deeper than that.
Yes. Thank you. That's well put. So for me, what I'm bringing, so that's it. In a nutshell, there's nuts and bolts to it, like you just mentioned, really checking into what we feel, which is feeling what we feel is again, something that is so important that most of us tend to think more than feel.
Yeah.
And so that's, and what we really care about. I mean, I have to ask you and your listeners, has anybody, when you were growing up in school, ever asked you, what do you care about?
Yeah.
What do you love? What would you love to learn today?
Yeah, that's the exact same question. When I start an Embodied Yoga Principles workshop, I say, okay, before we begin, what do you guys care about? What's important to you? What's meaningful? And then I start from there and say, like actually tuning into that before I kind of impose anything. And, for me, like, when we will get back to surf, but having a linguistic practice was really powerful because it's like we are linguistic animals. We are linguistic creatures. We create so much of our life with language. It's how we coordinate action with other people. It's a major way of connecting with other people. And we don't have any training in that. We don't have any training in emotions, like recognizing emotions. We also don't have any training in how to ask for what you want. I was teaching that to a management group yesterday, like how to make a request or how to express appreciation. No one ever taught me that. These are like simple things that are actually, a big part of our lives. And interesting, you're the first person we've had on who's a kind of coming from a system of linguistics as well as somatics. So MVC is not exactly linguistics, but I know we've both studied other forms of linguistics as well. And it just seemed to me like there's a lot of people who are doing embodiment, but they haven't got any training in language. And it's almost like language is denied, or language is kind of, that's just words, that's in the head. And actually language is a huge part of our life. And when I met you, I was just discovering MVC2 and other linguistic systems. And it just struck me as so important to be able to have a skillful linguistic practice as well as an embodied practice. And my sense is what you've done is really bring those two things together.
Yeah, those are two disciplines I've practiced a long time and really love. And to bring them together, they're both mind, body, spirit practices, but they emphasize different things. NBC emphasizes linguistics, even though it's a body and spiritual practice, as aikido emphasizes the physicality of it, but it's also crosses those other domains as well. So yeah, to bring them together to feed each other is my niche in our world, of somatics and linguistics. So in fact, just a quick little aside, which is not really, is, the name of, we talk about needs, for example, being, when you said those words to me, that you didn't like me, my need for appreciation and understanding were not met, or something like that, is a phrase that we've heard, for people studying NVC, because it's really important to feel what we feel and get in touch with what we need.
And maybe just to jump in, if I may, the people that are actually listening to this can do that right now, right? Like the basic NBC kata is like, okay, you know, there's an observation.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, and that's clean, right? It's like, okay, I see when you said this, it's not when you're an asshole, right? Or like
Right.
if you know, I do on live now, it's like, okay, you know, when I notice that we're talking on Skype, I, you know, feel warm and pleased. It meets my need for connection and learning. So there's like a need behind the feeling, and that's often the tricky bit. And you know, I just invite anyone listening to this right now to go notice how you feel, and like, what's the need behind that? You know, if it's an unmet need, maybe it's not such a happy feeling, and if it's a met need, it's probably a more pleasant feeling. And it seems like even people that are quite in their bodies, they might have the emotional part, but the needs part is rarer and takes a little bit longer in my experience.
Because it's really expansive. What needs are, you know, what are they? And so that's the piece that the somatic world really informs. Needs are not something outside of us, which is often, you know, like I need this or I need that. It's really who we are, qualities of being. And that's what this surf practice is, which I'll get to in a moment. Yeah. The book that I wrote, because it takes, instead of meeting my needs or having a meeting with my needs, it's actually becoming what you need. And that's the idea, the shift that I want to bring in, which is needs are when I have a need for understanding or a need for clarity or a need for integrity. Those are qualities that we can cultivate. And that's where the somatic world interfaces with the linguistic world of nonviolent communication.
And it's interesting.
Well, go ahead.
Just to complete on this, and we'll do surf maybe afterwards, that it seems like there's a way that normally I find myself making a case for somatics, for embodiment, and saying, look, the body really matters. It's really important. You know, it's part of leadership or whatever it is. You know, this will really help you in these ways. But it's almost like with a somatic audience is almost like making a case for linguistics. You know, there's almost like a kind of, but why do we need to learn about language? You know, why does that matter? Surely we can just be in our bodies and maybe be centered. And I feel like as the first person who's on the show talking about language, like literally I've interviewed over 50 embodiment teachers now, and you're the first one that's like really talking about a linguistic system. Like it's really worth underlining the value of that. You know, for me to be able to, like, if I'm in conflict with my wife, to be able to separate out the judgments and the opinions from the facts, you know, from the observations, to be able to make a clean request to him. That's what sold it to me, actually, when I was in California. Someone told me about requests, and I immediately improved my sex life. And I was like, okay, I'm sold. You know, this is great. And it's and also like the way to coordinate through time and space, right? Like me and you are only here because we did some language beforehand.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like if we're miles away from people, the language is the only way we can actually get stuff done and get organized and, you know, coordinate with each other. And I feel like that's often missing from the embodiment or somatics world. It's people very in the moment, but not necessarily having that ability to coordinate projects and do things with other people over time and space.
Yeah, they're all important. And again, if our words are doing one thing, but our body's doing another, if we're like open and loving with our words, but our body's contracted, we're giving double messages. So to have everything in alignment, that is, you know, the core of powerful leadership, self-leadership too.
Okay, I've more than interrupted you enough. So so let's do some surfing.
And that's perfect. Actually, this was all a perfect lead up because this does marry the linguistics and the somatics. So let's see. This is a wonderful centering practice. It can take a few seconds or take as long as you want. I have a sitting practice, so I enjoy entering it sometimes like this. So what are some qualities of being? You know, qualities. What's a quality, Mark, that you would love to have a little bit more of in your life?
Receptivity. That's one I struggle with.
Receptivity. Okay. I don't hear that one too often. I like that. I'll try it on myself. So I notice I'm getting a lot of reflection on these glasses here. It's kind of. So shape. SURF. Surf. Shape. Sit with your head above your heart, above your belly. You can keep your eyes open or closed, whatever you care about, or whatever you like. Head above heart, above belly. Soften your eyes. let your tongue rest on the floor of your mouth. Imagine the weight that you might be carrying on your shoulders from the day. Imagine it falling off, and put it on the ground. And you can pick it up later, don't worry if you need it. But for right now, just let it fall. And unclench your sit bone, your sphincter muscles. Feel your seat if you're sitting. And feet on the ground, imagine the bottom of your feet opening up to the ground. That's the shape. Unify, you. So take a deep breath in and go like this. And do that again. And as you do that, relax into your full length. Relax into your full length. And that relaxes and unifies your system. Resource. This is the need or the quality. Ask yourself, Mark, and ask other, and everybody who's listening, ask yourself, how would it feel right now in this moment if I felt a little bit more receptivity? What would that feel like in my body? And this is a question to your body. And just await any changes that you might notice. How would it feel if I have just a tiny bit more receptivity? What would that feel like? It's a question. Did you notice any shifts at all, Mark?
Yep, for sure. I mean, just the kind of physical alignment I always find helpful, and the sighing very relaxing. And I like that inquiry method for centering. I think Wendy Palmer is the first person I saw do that, and there's something very kind of coaching, kind of open-ended about that. Makes me really inquire into myself. So I like that inquiry method of centering.
So what changes went on inside of you when you, what does receptivity feel like a little bit more?
A little bit more relaxed, a little bit further back, a little bit softer, a little bit more open. So there's a definite kind of shaping and tonality to it.
Yeah, thanks. So for the listeners who aren't real experienced in this piece of it, a couple points on that on the resource part of this. Do it on a daily practice. Pick a word, pick a quality like receptivity, and hold it for a daily. Just for a little bit at a time, a few seconds, minutes each day, and get to know it. And it'll shape, and notice how it shapes you. Notice how you breathe differently. Notice where you tense, where you soften. Notice how you sit. Notice how you move. And this is the shape of receptivity. But it also, as you try it on, it shows you what the physicality of receptivity is. And there are qualities of being that are very expansive that you can always learn more about. So you could take receptivity and explore it for a year, and you'll still be learning something every day.
Yeah, I remember one time Bonnie Bainbridge Cohen, who's one of the big names in embodiment, she was playing with receptivity with her, and I didn't quite get what she was saying, and she sort of touched me and did some very subtle somatic body work, and I just kind of like opened up like a huge friendly vagina to the universe. And I was just kind of like, I had no idea that was even possible, like it's just, and she just sort of gave me a sort of sense of it, like, oh, that you can be like that as a human being. And, maybe that's where body work comes in, isn't it? Sometimes people need that like extra helping hand to kind of help them along the way. But, I also think it's amazing, this inquiry process. It's like, oh, I do kind of know how to do that, or at least to start to know how to do that. Mm-hmm. And I don't need the exact instructions, as it were. But nice. And what was the story in surf?
Wait, before we get right there, because there's an important piece that for coaching too, is sometimes if receptivity is a word that's triggering, or something like you might pick another word like gratitude or integrity or honesty. Some of those things can be really trigger, or acceptance. That's a triggering one. Where a person feels like, I don't deserve acceptance. I don't deserve the to sit with these things. So if you find yourself doing this practice and contracting in your body around it, tightening, resisting, and starting with the self-judgment, ask yourself for half of that. What would half of that receptivity feel like?
Yeah.
That's too much. Half that, half again, half again. So you'll find your threshold and tolerance, and that's where you can begin to build tolerance and start to explore.
Yeah, that's another thing I got from Wendy, that like, what would a little bit be like? The idea that you can tolerate a little bit. Of course it brings up stuff, right? Like, whether, let's take a sort of basic yin yang kind of polarity. I was working with receptivity. You could work on kind of a more yang one. And it's like, well, there's a reason you're that shape, and you've developed that as a strategy to stay safe and get love. And as soon as I start working, say, being more yang with someone, they immediately worry about being too much or being seen as aggressive, or like what will people think, and who am I to do this? And then as soon as, for me, what came up doing receptivity was like, okay, well, what am I going to let in, and is this safe, and what if I become a wimp, and like all this stuff immediately comes up as a somatic anxiety. Even just articulating it now, but it's like, yeah, you're challenging your system when you do any of these things. And sometimes that just like little incremental titration, I think they call it in trauma work, where it's like, oh, look, I didn't die. That's great.
Yeah. So the more triggered you are, the more contracted, and the less you can resource your whole self, as an integrated, the wisdom of your whole self. You move back into older patterns. So this is a centering practice, and it centers on words as whole body somatic impressions. So needs become more than words. Like, how would it feel? I need to be more receptive. But when you practice it, you get to a whole body impression that you can come back to.
Yeah.
And it helps with the practice. So the last piece of that is field. And yeah, you're right. It connects very much with Wendy Palmer's, who I think it was 3 F's: form, fill, field. And she was just a wonderful teacher. And so the field is what, fill yourself up with that sense of receptivity, but then imagine the space around you, or bubble around you, if you will. Front, back, sides, above, below, all equidistant, all around you, and fill it with that sense of receptivity. And as you go through the day, you can practice, one, moving with that shape of receptivity, but also expanding that bubble big enough so that when you're speaking with someone, you can speak with them in this field, this sense of receptivity, and watch things change.
And just to be clear, because I've seen people get really confused with this, that you're actually visualizing that, right? Like when the first time, like Wendy said to me, like, expand the field, I was just like, well, what the hell do you mean? Like there's actually like the how is the visualization, right?
Yeah, bubble is easy. Making a bubble around you and visualize the bubble. And if you want, just imagine like a listening field, meaning a bubble so if I'm sitting here, I basically expand the bubble big enough so that you're included. And I've done this over the internet too, and it actually, there's a bit of that. So as I start to include you, so what the person who's in this field receives is, when I relax, because this is a centering practice, I transmit that, and you begin to relax. And then it changes the dialogue. Yeah. So this is how we communicate.
Yeah. Sometimes I saw that with the kind of linguistic peace building systems. It would be like, okay, well, the words sound nice, but bet you can't do that under pressure. Bet you can't do that with a gun to your head. Like, without kind of actually regulating the physiology, it was very difficult. I saw it was very difficult for people to employ the linguistic systems they'd learn. So they'd learn some form of sort of nonviolent communication, or, some other linguistic peace building system, but unless they could regulate themselves, they had no chance of using it.
Which takes us into the second practice I wanted to share.
Okay. Can we do a listening one? Is that cool? Could we do a listening one? I'm keen to hear you talk about embodied empathy as well.
Well, the one we just did is a pretty solid one, okay. And it's unique in that not only do you practice embodying these integrity or honesty or dignity or any quality, but you imbue the space around you with those qualities. And that they're all different flavors of empathy. Sometimes you want to listen to someone with receptivity. Sometimes you want to listen to them with integrity, honesty, or dignity. So those are the listening. Does that make sense, what I'm saying?
Yeah, to some extent. And I mean, make this really concrete. If someone says that, I'm kind of a body person, I'm listening to this, and I want to be a better listener. I want to, I get that that's important in life. How do I be a better listener?
We transmit our state of being. If I'm sitting here really tight and I start talking to you and telling you how relaxed I am or how much I really appreciate you, your body's going to tense up, and we're going to have it's going to affect everything. If I do the centering practice, the surf practice, for example, and I relax, which only takes a few seconds, and I want to have I even imagine a quality and extend that quality, that's going to change the nature of our conversation. That's the listening.
Yeah.
And the piece that you're talking about also is so important, because if I'm contracted in the relationship with my wife, for example, that's not, all the practices we have they're going to throw them out the window, because we're going to go back into our conditioned tendencies. So there's other practices we can do to self-regulate. And that's what, how do we regulate our system so that we're not contracted as we speak? So here's another practice. It's a 5-element practice, and it comes through more of a Tai Chi practice. And Stuart Heller was Dr. Stuart Heller, one of my teachers as well. I think he introduced me to this type of work, and like all the things that we do, we transform them. But I do want, like Wendy, I want to appreciate Dr. Stuart Heller. So anyway, the practice is like this. Can you hear me if I'm standing up back here?
Yeah, still good.
Okay, is ground, and my feet are in a stance. I don't know if you can see it too well, but
one is slightly forward. Yeah.
Yeah, ground, water.
Great. So this is just the audio, so I'm going to talk people through what you're doing, if that's okay. So in the first one, ground, you had your kind of palms down, and then you went to water. You put your kind of palms back and your weight slightly back as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Water, fire.
So you come forward, and the hands have come forward in kind of like a aikido hami.
Wind.
So here you spread the arms out, both arms out, fully stretched.
And space.
And space just sort of standing in a fairly neutral way by the look of things.
Ground. So ground, water, fire, wind, and space. So my videos of this, I'm happy to share it with you and anybody listening to, so they can get a better picture of it. So each of these are just like the last practices or qualities, except you bring them in with your whole body. Mm-hmm. Ground is, what do you care about? What's the ground that you stand on? And the art of nonviolent communication, of aikido, of somatics, to me, this is the essence of it, which is learning to find your own ground, hear where you stand, hear what you care about. And when you can learn to listen to that ground, it's also the practice of learning to listen to other people's ground. Everybody's got their own vantage points. It's learning how to listen through all the stuff so you can move from your ground to listen to their ground. Needs is a metaphor for ground in a nonviolent communication. What do you care about? What does the other person care about below the strategies and all the talk? Underneath it, if you learn to home into that. So, but first you have to really, really learn, and on daily practice is learning to listen to, what do you care about? Again, this is a question that changed my life and brought me into this work actually many years ago, when I decided I wanted to do something else besides, more than be a goldsmith, which I love, but I want to do something out in the world. I had to really decide what I really cared about. And that's been the thing that's helped me through to change. So ground, water, all that's behind us. This is something we tend to not think about. We're always up in front of us all the time, doing what we have to do, taking care of business. We forget, the ancestors behind us, the the genetic history that we're linked to, the teachers in our lives, the great teachers on this planet. There's so much behind us that we can connect into. And for the sake of time, I'm not going to belabor that or go into it too much. Maybe I come to your place and do and offer a workshop sometime in it. But so what's behind us, all who walk beside us, those people, our associates, our friends, our partners. And really, this is an internal practice where we're spending time in gratitude and remembering and appreciating, and the young ones in front of us. That'll go into the future in places we'll never go, but that remind us about to play and to be close to the earth, gathering all our relationships. So when you know the ground you stand on and you connect to all your relationships, then you can speak. This is move to fire, and this is where we can speak our truths. So ground, water, fire, making sharp cuts, clean cuts. My wife is an amazing cook, and her knives are very sharp in the kitchen so she can create incredible beauty. So we can relax into our power when we know the ground we stand on, and we're connected to all our relationships. And then wind. This is the self-regulation part, because sometimes things come at us. Words come at us. Fists come at us. We want to step off the line, not farther away, not closer, just step away to get a different perspective. Watch it go by. And this is what can relieve our system. This is an amazing practice. When you get tense, move off the line. And, you can do micro movements. I do this with my wife, Judith. If she's like yelling at me, or not yelling, but if we're upset, I'll just do this. And she knows that I'm moving to wind as I'm talking to her for the sake of connecting with her in a better way. Mm-hmm. And then wind, and then move to space. Everything's in service of space and being present. So those are 5 elements. Again, you practice them physically, but also you bring your imagination to the practice. And so these are elements that ways of being and qualities of being that you can bring into a business or a partner relationship or any relationship.
It's good to have a map, isn't it, of a way of shifting and different modes to go into. I was using a 4 elements map with a team building yesterday, and any map's good, but it's helpful to have some options there, isn't it, that you've trained on a kind of macro level, big level, so you can actually access them on a more smaller micro level when in day-to-day life.
Yeah, it's so true, So yeah, to have that, I like playing music, to play. I can play on the piano and practice things so I can embody it, and so there's a body memory to it. And I can also practice those kind of chords and notes in my head. I can practice, and that will actually help me when I go and sit down on the piano. If you practice ground, for example, daily, can you imagine how it would change your life if every morning you stood there and you go, what do I really care about? As Richard Strozzi's term, I think it was, organizing principle.
Yeah, for the sake of what, he'll often say.
Yeah, so this is one of those things that organize you.
Yeah. And for me, this is really the power of purpose. I was working with a team yesterday in a business, and it was like, okay, why do you guys do this? So it's just not something they connected with regularly. And as a result, they were fairly demotivated. They were caught in detail. They were arguing with each other because the egos were there, and they hadn't realized that actually, I won't say the organization, but they had a pretty good, for the sake of what? They weren't a widget factory. They're an organization that really did something in the world that they actually really cared about. And, just reorientating that and reminding them of that sense of purpose was profound, both in the individual centering, but also in terms of the cohesion and the harmony and the communication and the conflict resolution. And I've done whole courses on purpose. We did one called Purpose Black Belt, an online course last year. And, seeing people reconnect to that is massive. It's certainly a lot of the source of my energy in life. People say, how do you do so much? I'm like, well, I don't really feel like I'm doing so much. I'm just connected to a sense of purpose. There's a sense of meaning and purpose to my days, and that is a hell of an energy source.
It could change the world. That's it. I can't only imagine what it would be like if, in our educational systems, if children were really asked, what would you love to learn today? What do you care about?
Yeah. what has meaning to you. And I feel like part of disembodiment is being cut off from that inner sense of like, wow, this really meets my needs. I feel deeply satisfied when I do this. And equally, like, there's a job I did the other day, and afterwards I was like, you know what? I wasn't quite on purpose there. It didn't quite have the felt resonance of being right. You know, like when you meet that girl you fall in love with, or the first time I saw aikido, there's the resonance of rightness. And I don't mean like moral rightness, but just of like, okay, this is deeply meeting some needs, and this is, you know, I'm on purpose now with this. And I had a sense with a job, you know what, I wasn't quite on purpose. I was a bit drained at the end of it. And I went, maybe I'm going to take less of those kind of jobs, you know, being tuned into that. I feel like it's part of social control in a way that people can just be convinced to do stuff for things they don't even need. Because it's like, if you're disconnected from that radar, how can you get back on track? You know, it's like your sat nav's broken.
Yeah. Yeah. What was that saying Yogi Berra said, if you don't stand for something, you'll fall for anything?
Very somatic saying, actually, in a way, isn't it? You know, if you're not tuned into that radar that tells you what you're on purpose for, then it's like, okay, I'll buy the latest whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I was just thinking of your work's taking you to some really interesting places. You know, you've been in prisons, Ethiopia, and that's one we share in common. Probably some very interesting organizations. The kind of commune you're a part of there, or the community you're a part of. I mean, are there any kind of just stories or experience of working with this stuff in some of these colorful and interesting organizations? Sometimes it's the illustrations that bring it out.
Yeah, there's so many of them. Well, in the practice I just showed you, I can't tell you how many people are amazed, or wrong word, are moved in different parts of it. For example, behind us in the water part of that practice, to actually reconnect with an ancestor or with someone who's behind us that we, you know, just we've learned to not value that, or not think, or to think it away, you know. But there's a visceral sense of, you know, if I think about as a goldsmith, there was this old man who sat back to back with me for years. And he was the kindest man I've, you know, in my life. He was the grandfather I always wanted. And, you know, he always say, come here, David, look at it. And I'd put my head on his shoulder, and I'd look at what he was making. He was setting a stone or something. And he was just generous with his knowledge and himself. It always made me laugh. And when I want to be more kind in my life, I remember him, and I think about his kindness. You know, I imagine him behind me. He's no longer, you know, he died many years ago, but I can imagine his hands on my back. And sometimes I don't know how to be kind in a certain way to someone I'm talking to, but my practice is to have him at my back. And if I do that, and imagine John, it's almost like, you know, that whole imagination shifts me into that moment of kindness. I can feel my body right now becoming more tender. Mm-hmm. And that is transmitted. So that's startling for a lot of people, because we don't think about what's behind us. And, you know, this is like the wind in we're a sail. It's like there's so much behind us that empowers us and gives meaning to our lives. Or that's in every workshop. People are moved by that. And the piece about wind, whenever you're triggered to move to wind, and I, you know, forget the workshops for a second. I'll just talk about me and my wife. Yeah. You know, we've been married for 30 years. And, you know, any of us doing this work, self-work, know that our significant others are our most challenging relationships. And they can make us, we can become more triggered I can go into prison and sit with 40 guys and you really hold my own and not get triggered, but I'll come home and then all of a sudden snap into an old pattern with my wife.
Yeah. Kids, parents, partners. Yeah. That's the hard stuff.
So the spiral blend practice, that third practice, I did want to share, but I'll just touch on it because, again, it's an expansive, long practice. I don't think we have time. But I would like to share a piece of it and answer your question about a story. I was jogging with my wife many years ago, and we were having our, we were the Bickersons and arguing about something. And I thought about Irimi Tenkan, which is an aikido thing where if, you're squared off with somebody, and next thing, and as this is coming, you step off the line and move behind, or just step off the line.
There's a 180-degree turn by stepping, kind of entering in and turning, right?
Right. And that is a piece of the listening work that I physically bring to the NBC thing, whereas two people are talking, stepping off the line, it's like that. Two people are talking, they're out, you're fighting, and stepping off the line, moving to wind, let it go by for a second. Let it go by, and self-regulate, relax your system, and then go behind the other person, and essentially get yourself out of the way of your listening, and listen with your whole self, and you're way more capable of empathizing when you can get yourself out of the way. So that came about running with my wife, and we're arguing. Next thing I decide, I wonder what it would be if I just stepped back a little bit and let her run in front of me, and in a sense, looked over her shoulder, see what she's seeing. And my body relaxed, and all of a sudden I can listen with a greater care and empathy.
I've seen fairly profound shifts in understanding when people have just swapped chairs, Like it's like they're saying, oh, I'm talking to this person, I'm telling them blah, blah, blah. And I'll say, okay, say what you want to say. Like, they're not there, right? So they're talking to an empty chair, or they're just standing and talking to a wall. And I say, okay, great. Now just turn around, sit in. I know it's weird, but just how might they be receiving it? And they go sit in the other chair and think, oh my God, I had no idea I was so aggressive or so judgmental. Or really like seeing a shift just from that physical change of position. And it doesn't sound like it would work well, but I know it's actually a tool and they're using Gestalt therapy, I believe, as well. And it works really well in terms of shifting people's ability to see the other side.
It's startling, isn't it? It's a startling revelation for a lot of people, because we don't think that we just think words. But there's so much nonverbal communication going on all the time. Our whole histories are always in us, and they're speaking and communicating. So, this body of work that we're talking about somatics and linguistics, both really put us more in touch with our histories and choices about what we practice and who we want to become.
Yeah. I mean, the first thing is just kind of getting a sense of that. What am I putting out there? I do exercises where people copy each other's posture or whatever. They're sometimes quite profound. They come across, aggressive because they don't feel that way, or they passive and they don't feel that way. And then there's, it's a fairly profound shift for a lot of people to realize they don't have to be victims of their state, that is something they can consciously change. Like, that's maybe been in my life for 20 years now. So it's hard. I have to remember that. I was working with some complete beginners yesterday, and they were like, wow, I don't have to be in this mood for the rest of the day. I just thought you had to wait till moods passed. It's like, no, you can, listen to the information, see what's going on, and then shift that if you want, and that's fairly profound, people. And just moving is helpful, isn't it? Like in conflict, just getting a couple of people up and walking sometimes, get them walking in the same direction. That can be helpful as much as, sitting down in chairs opposite each other talking, which is what mediation is normally done as, can be super helpful, can't it? Just those shifts of body position.
Yeah. Proximity, distance, those things matter. And if, someone's right in front of you in your, essentially your power zone, energetically, as well as physically, they're going to feel that. So learning how to not take it all in, not just, back up or move into it, but actually let it go by is such a valuable skill.
I've heard people say I have my best conversations with my teenager or my husband in the car. And I wonder if some of that is they're sitting side by side. It's like you're literally moving in the same direction together while sitting side by side. So there isn't quite the same somatic possibility to be sat opposite someone or standing opposite and be getting in each other's face. There's a distance there. You're in a relaxed chair and you're heading somewhere together. That seems to be particularly true of men in my experience. That side-to-side thing is preferable to the face-to-face thing. But
yeah, it's interesting. I never thought about it quite like that.
How is it to work in prisons? That's pretty hardcore.
Well, I haven't done it for a while, but I actually am going in this weekend. Tell you that, Ed, it's where I learned a lot of the NVC work, because one, I could help people out there, and the workshops were for free as I volunteered, and it was pretty intense. What I find working in the prisons is, whether I'm working with a group of men in the prison, 30, 40 people, or I'm out in a workshop in a corporate situation, or just a social situation, any group of people, they're basically the same.
Right.
There's just a couple degrees of difference, but it helps me. Besides, of course, I feel like the work helps people, so that's why I love to do it. But it really helps me see the parts of me that I've imprisoned in my own life, and remembering that we're all just a couple degrees different from each other. And by learning to see the humanity in people that we have really hidden away from ourselves, so we don't have to see, to be able to be in that experience and go, I'm not much different than anybody here.
Yeah, just 7:30 a.m. this morning, I walked past this kind of a street guy drinking a can of strong cider, and I know this guy. I know him from 12-step, and it's like, I've heard this guy's story. I know who he is, and he's currently relapsing right now. And I walked past him, and he's, I guess, been up all night, and he's, or drinking for breakfast. It's early in the morning. It's still dark, and I walked by him, and I said, hello. I won't say his name. I said, hello, and his name. And he said, hello, Mark. And I went to my A meeting, and he went wherever he was going with his drink. And now, I used to see sort of guys on the street like that as kind of some different alien. But I've done the washing up with this guy many times after meetings, and chatted about his noisy neighbor and his girlfriend. And, I know this guy. So it's like, I can't see him as something different. And it's like really just a few choices, a few bits of luck, maybe some slight genetic differences, but basically he and I ain't that different. And I'm on my way to AA, followed by a really rich work day doing what I do. And, I'm guessing he didn't have such a good day today, like hanging out in the park in the rain and the cold, or, wherever he was today, God love him. And it's like, I can't see him as fundamentally different from me.
Yeah. The last time I was in the prison, I remember I walked into this circle of men, and there was one guy, he just kind of looked a little bit crazed, or something about him. So I gave him a wide berth and kind of walked around, as I said, I greeted most everybody. But after 2 days, I was like, I really like this guy. I don't know what his crimes were.
Yeah.
But, and he, and his message to me was, let people know, we're not so different from you. There really are, the stories in the newspapers and everything like that. It's just, really wants to demonize people. And, I know they've done things that are terrible, and, they really are the parts of us that we hide away.
Yeah. And I sometimes say, I have a friend that worked in prison. He always said the murderers were the nicest people, because they're just people that had a really bad day.
I'll tell you that they're one of the best, besides being a captive audience. They actually are some of the best people to work with, because these people do not want to be violent anymore. The people in my work,
motivated, I guess.
In prison. So they are working really hard, So it takes a lot out of me going into the prison, but it's worth it.
Do you ever fear they won't let you out? I kind of have this fantasy that I'll go to prison to do a job one day, and they won't let me out. Maybe that's just my paranoia.
I don't know, but there's something that goes on more than once where, the guards come in, and everybody, all the inmates have to stand up so they can count them. And a common joke is, hey, don't count him. He looks like one of us, but
well, that's the thing. Once you start thinking, I'm not so different from these guys.
I'm not. I just, I relate. I don't know why, but
I feel like with this work of teaching embodiment, which you both do around the world, and I've been following you from afar for the last few years since last time we met, and it seems like we both have pretty cool lives. I've just been in Amsterdam, and like I met my wife teaching, and you do some really cool projects, and it's like I almost feel like I'm going to get caught out at some point and be, either made to get a proper job or be put in prison. Like that's the fear for me, like, because it's such an awesome life, and I feel like we've sort of cheated the system somehow. You know what I mean? By actually being in touch with what we care about, and actually having a job that we feel like makes a difference, and earning a living doing this weird kind of hippie aikido stuff. It's like, wow, I'm getting away with this. And by that, I don't mean that I'm not giving real value to people. I actually think it's total gold what I'm teaching. I don't mind taking thousands of pounds off corporations for it. No guilt at all, because it feels like, okay, this is valuable. But simultaneously, there's this sense of like, wow, we do this for a living, David.
I do feel lucky, and I'm still got plenty of turmoil inside, which keeps me into this work. Besides that, the blessed life that I do have, what really brings me and keeps me here is, the bigger picture for me is, I really see it, it's my politic as well, where I see our faculties for empathy are so fragmented. One thing about living in this community for 30 years, it offers me a tiny glimpse of something that is lost primarily, which is, if you imagine for just a second, I'll just bring it out big for just a second, is that, how we evolved in tribes, we are constantly in relationship to each other and the environment. And that practice of listening to each other and listening to the environment and being a part of it is exercised our faculties for empathy. And we have essentially, those have atrophied to a large, by and large, they've atrophied. We still have them, we always have them, but we don't exercise them in any way close to what we evolved from. And I think that is the basis of a lot of the problems in the world. Is empathy is learning to listen to our collective life.
Nice. Okay, well, it's maybe a good place to start to wrap it up, David. I was just putting up a website here on the computer to make sure I got the right one, because there's another David Weinstock who does something called neurokinetic therapy, but your website is liminalsomatics.com, right? That's LIMINAL somatics, SOMATICS.com, liminalsomatics.com. So I just want to make sure people don't confuse you with the other David Weinstock. And if they go to that site, which is a really nice site, actually, they'll see a kind of purple heading and pictures of you and video of you doing the 5 elements and things like that. Some of the stuff we've been talking about there. There's like some good resources there.
Yeah. By the way, there's the 3 practices: surf, shape shifting, and the spiral blend. If you go to YouTube, you can find all 3 of them. It was really hard to kind of do it over the podcast, but if people really want to explore them, they're right there.
Yeah,
and I invite people to write and contact me if they have any thoughts or questions about such things.
Yeah, I've got a copy of your book, Becoming What You Need, here as well. I'm going to plug that because I think it's actually really accessible. Like it's a nice little book. It's not, it's not too wordy. It's got lots of practical stuff in there. It's clear. Like if people are listening to this and they're fairly new to this kind of aikido-based somatic stuff, or definitely if they're in peace building or kind of communication work, that's an easy read and a lot in there to work with practically. I see you do workshops all over the place as well, don't you? All over about a quarter of our audience are in the States. So there's some people that will be able to get to you in the States. I see stuff coming up in Houston, Idaho, out on the West Coast, and you do stuff in Thailand as well, right? Is that the case?
Thailand. I'm going to be in Japan for quite a back and forth this year. In Australia, I'm going to be doing a several city tour, and Hawaii. The 4 islands are coming up in March or April.
You go to some nice places, man. You don't go to. I was in Manchester yesterday. You don't go to Seattle.
I am going to Houston in a couple. Well, no. Houston.
Problem. Okay. If you have a problem, you can sort out. Okay, so let's leave it there. Final message for the world, David. Final message for our listeners.
The last thought I would say is, when we learn to listen to our collective voice, we can find our own and empower our own voice. To me, that's the core of the work. So, thanks for hosting me here, Mark. It's so good to see you again, and let's continue some conversations offline too. Okay,
man. Thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, pleasure.
If you enjoyed this episode, subscribe to get more. If you'd like to help us build the Embodied Tribe, leave a review on iTunes or share this on your social media. If you're interested in training globally, sign up to receive the newsletter at embodiedfacilitator.com. Until next time, welcome home to the body.